Well, I'd like to welcome you all to the latest presentation of the John Birch Society Speakers Bureau. I think you're in for a treat tonight. We have a terrific speaker. The John Birch Society, of course, was founded in 1958 to bring about less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world. And I'm convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, after being a member for over 30 years now, that if it weren't for the John Birch Society, indeed, this would be a much different world. In just the case of the Constitutional Convention efforts that have been made over the last 30 years, I would say that without the efforts and influence of the John Birch Society, I would say that our Constitution would have been in dire straits, and maybe even at this time, merely a historic relic. We will get going right away, but I want to point out that we do have a tremendous book table in the back. And most of you, I'm sure, picked up a copy of the program. And I would encourage you to take a look at those individuals that have ads here, because they are our supporters that make this presentation possible. And they are the ones that financed the entire affair, because most of us cannot afford to hire a room and do all these things. So here we are. Also, I want to point out that on the book table, we have copies of the New American that aren't even available to regular subscribers yet. It's entitled Natural Disasters and Government Aid. They also have extra copies of the last one, Promoting Antifa Mayhem. And that is a tremendous issue, and articles that, anyways, they're tremendous. I just want to say something about the New American magazine, because over the last 25, 30 years, I have depended upon this for being on the winning side of arguments as to the fact, because nothing gets in this magazine unless it's properly vetted. And it is a virtual storehouse of information that you won't get unless you dig for it. And this kind of information is indeed valuable. Also, there are some real deals on the back table. One of them is this little book at Agenda 21 NU, only $2. And if you throw in an extra $1, you get a video on Agenda 21. And then come up with another $1, and you'll get a copy of the John Birch Society's overview, which is a tremendous introduction to a conservative point of view. Anyways, it's very inexpensive. Pick one up on your way out. We're going to get kicked off here. I would like to recognize some dignitaries that we have here tonight. I just noticed in the back room, Matt Shea is here, and as well as Karen Skoog from Ponderay County. She's a commissioner there. We got Caleb Collier from Spokane Valley City Council in the back, and Mike Munch from the Valley Council. And I am scanning the audience. Did I miss anybody? Oh, Rob Chase. Yes, I apologize, Rob, our county treasurer. And Heather Scott is here from the Idaho legislature. Okay, I'll ask you again. Did I miss anyone? Oh, who? Okay. Okay, anybody else? All right, hearing none, I'm going to ask Caleb Collier to come forward and give the invocation. and remain standing afterward, and Mike Munch will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, I ask you to come into this congregation, and I ask you to motivate this congregation. I ask that you fill this room with your spirit, and that you remind us that government is not an agent of chaos, that we are a country founded on religious liberty. I ask that a spirit of Bonhoeffer enters this room, that we will stand up to tyrannical actions by our government. For if God is with us, who can stand against us? And I ask that this congregation takes back this country. For where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, and we are indeed in a state of liberty. In your holy name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now I'd like to introduce someone that I used to be in as an employee. I used to work, yes. Barely. But he was quite a taskmaster and continues to be, because he went to the Washington State Legislature, 8 years ago now, promising lower taxes, less government, and more freedom. And he has never, ever wavered from that goal. He has been true to each vote. Even when there was a slight error, he would make certain that it was corrected. I want to introduce Representative Matt Shea to introduce our guest tonight.
Thank you, Jim. Taskmaster, huh? I don't know. So it's great to see the John Birch Society not making an impact in the community like I hear over in Olympia all the time. So, wow, it's packed out. We have over, 110 people here at least? It's awesome. Why are we all here? Because we know something's wrong, right? We know something's wrong. You can call it Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030 or whatever name they come up with next, but we know something is wrong. And there is one man that I have met that made Agenda 21 a household name, a word that the liberals couldn't even rehabilitate. And I am glad he is here tonight. He's a dear friend. He has been in this fight for so long. He's endured so much hardship. Even he stood alone sometimes on the East Coast, getting battered by the media over there, and did not ever once back down. And you know what? He has been vindicated more times than anybody else I know, actually, in the movement. But one thing you may not know about him is he was actually invited to Cambridge to debate. Cambridge. And as he told me earlier, he said, that's one of those things you don't want to go to, but you can't turn down, right? Because they recognize him as the expert on land use regulation and property rights in the United States of America. So let's please give a capital of free Washington, Spokane Valley welcome to my great friend, the president of the American Policy Center, Tom DeWeese.
Oh my goodness, people have littered up here. Thank you very much, Matt. I want to tell you, I have more respect for Matt Shea than about any elected official in this country. He is just absolutely awesome, and I am so proud to call him my friend. And, he's put together this Freedom Coalition in the state legislature, and over the last, 3 years or so, they have managed to get, as many as 30 different bills passed, every one of them designed to reduce the size, power, cost of government, and that is just awesome that you've got that. I am absolutely thrilled that all of you are here. This is my 4th city in 4 days, and it's been a wild week. We've gotten incredible response, incredible energy that has taken place, and I'm excited about that because one of the things we're really kind of worried about that's happening, there was a lot of energy in the last election. People rose up and we elected a new president to the shock of the world. And one of the things I've seen happen, I saw it happen with Ronald Reagan. An awful lot of our movement, people who are, believe as we do and want is what we want, then they say, okay, fine, he's going to take care of all that for us and we can stop now. We can go home. And I've seen that happen. I've been told Tea Party groups and other groups around the country, when I've gone there to speak, they say, we used to have 100 to 200 people. Now we can only get about 25. Ladies and gentlemen, now is the moment when we need to really put our energy into it. I mean, think about it. We had Barack Obama. If we had Hillary Clinton in there was no hope of getting anything taken care of that way. They were going to be totally ignored. We now have a possibility to do that. And I've said many times, if Donald Trump did nothing else, the one thing that he succeeded in doing was rolling back the curtain and showing how entrenched these guys are and how far they're willing to go to keep that power. And it is up to us now to rise up and begin to make some headway. We're not going to do it overnight, but we need to be there. And I am so thrilled that you're here tonight. So I'm here to talk to you about what's going on. And I know you've all heard the terms Agenda 21. A lot of you have read books, read articles, been to other meetings and so forth. Let me approach this in a different way that maybe you've heard before. There's always been a force loose in the world seeking domination over others. Usually it's a drive for power's sake, conquer other tribes, kingdoms or nations, grab their resources, enslave their people, build wealth and power, rule the world. These guys, these megalomaniacs like Napoleon and Stalin and Hitler, these kind of people, they've always sought to control. Kings thought it was their right to do it. We had secret societies that have plotted to gain power and control over the world, no matter how demented their ideas might be. And each tried to gain it in a different way. Most of the time, they're putting armies in the field. They are moving in to conquer countries. They're killing people. There's wars that break out. And the truth of the matter is, no one has ever succeeded in controlling the world. They've always failed for one reason or another. Hitler and Napoleon failed because they forgot Russia has winters. So that's what happens when you don't read don't read history, Hitler. Well, what the other thing that they've forgotten is that people who are facing oppression in their own country, over their own families and so forth, fight back more passionately to defend their homeland and defend their families. And this is the reason why these efforts have failed. However, what if such power mongers who want to rule the world could find a way to keep their aggression under wraps and out of sight from those that they intend to conquer until it's too late? Better yet, what if they could actually get their targeted victims to help them achieve their goal to control them? No armies in the field, no shots fired. Instead, the people that they're working to control gladly pull in the Trojan horse and celebrate its arrival. What if there was a way to organize the world under a single unifying plan by nearly everyone? Everyone believes it's a fact and it's necessary. Everyone would be convinced that to oppose such a plan would be a direct threat to humanity. Acceptance of that plan would see every nation voluntarily surrendering their independence and their sovereignty to these aggressors. They would even help raise money to pay for the system that the aggressors are putting in place. These new rulers would then issue exact orders that would be followed by everybody, gaining more and more power with each dictate. But people would voluntarily forget their history. They would voluntarily reject their culture and never ask a question about it. Was it not always so, they would say? What could be such a threat, so powerful that the entire world would lie down to accept such global servitude? How about the threat of environmental Armageddon? Who could oppose saving the planet? What if you dared to oppose such a plan? Now, John Birch decided we were going to stand up, we're going to wave our Constitution, say, I've got rights, and I'm free, and I'm independent. Well, the mob, beginning to accept all of this across the globe, around the country, would start to fear anybody who had such dangerous thoughts, would surround you, and they would rip up your Constitution, and they would shout to you, it doesn't matter what rights you think you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. Right? And only a selfish zealot who refused to give up their creature comforts would oppose saving Mother Earth. And that would be the end of the debate, as your new rulers look on satisfied, as their drive for control is complete, because now they would be in control of all the world's resources, the land, the air, the water. They would leave very little ability for us to oppose it. Well, of course, in truth, such a plan does exist. And it's taking over at a pace and a scope that no force of power ever experienced in history. Hitler would be so envious. So powerful and controlling is this force that so far it certainly hasn't had to fire a shot as it gains new power every day. And the incredible part about this, it's not a secret. Everyone in the world knows of it. The aggressors have written down every detail of their plan and have told us in their own words how it's going to work. Citizens of the world, the direct target of the plan, accept each new dictate in its name and as most nations enthusiastically work to put it in place. An organization called the Club of Rome, one of the NGO organizations out of the United Nations, and one of the leading forces behind this plan, openly admitted their purpose and goal, saying, quote, "The common enemy of humanity is man. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All of these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself." End quote. Ladies and gentlemen, that is diabolical. Turn man against himself so that every aspect of human life is a threat. In order to subjugate the entire human race, get man to imprison himself. First to be targeted. To make this happen, of course, would be the three pillars of freedom: free enterprise, private property, individuality. And what do they call this new diabolical tool that now leads the force of global control over all humanity, where it's quickly invading every single level of our government, our communities, and our neighborhoods? Its name is sustainable development. The term sustainable development was first introduced to us by the United Nations through its Commission on Global Governance. You have any doubt what it's about? Global governance? Can we translate that to mean anything else but world domination? It was then, this policy was then encased in a document called Agenda 21. Now you've heard that term, but what is it, and what does it have to do with changing your community? Well, let me start with some history. In 1992, 50,000 delegates made up of 179 heads of state, diplomats, business leaders, government bureaucrats, and members of thousands of non-governmental organizations, private organizations, converged on Rio de Janeiro to introduce to the world a document that they called, quote, a comprehensive blueprint for reorganizing human society. There has never been a more powerful statement for the purpose of government, for the purpose of ruling the people of the world than that. A comprehensive blueprint for reorganizing human society. And obviously, they thought it was pretty serious stuff. 50,000 of them met to do this. Then, Nancy Pelosi introduced the idea in a resolution to the U.S. Congress later that fall. And what did she say it was? A comprehensive blueprint. I've got the C-SPAN video on my website at AmericanPolicy.org if you want to see it. The United Nations, in 1993, in one of its publications, described Agenda 21 like this, quote, Agenda 21 proposes an array of actions which are intended to be implemented by every person on earth. Where's your freedom of choice in that statement? It goes on to say, it calls for specific changes in the activities of all people. Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all humans unlike anything the world has ever experienced. End quote. 50,000 delegates, diplomats, heads of state, the United Nations made that statement. Not some nut over here, some head of some radical organization or something, an individual. This was the official policy that they said it was. Then, let me share some documents with you because, you see, I have been deemed by the Southern Poverty Law Center a domestic terrorist because I tell you these things, and they say I have made a career out of spreading scare tactics, and all spreading lies and conspiracy theories. So I don't want to do that. I want to give you their words, okay? The American Planning Association is one of the largest planning groups in the country. They are in practically every community. And in 1994, they put out a newsletter. This is for Northern California. And in it, they have an article entitled, How Sustainable is Our Planning? Paragraph 5 of this says this. Vice President Gore's book, Earth in the Balance, addressed many of the general issues of sustainability. Within the past year, the President's Council on Sustainable Development, that would have been Bill Clinton, has been organized to develop recommendations for incorporating sustainability into the federal government. Also, various groups have been formed to implement Agenda 21, a comprehensive blueprint for sustainable development that was adopted at the 1992 Earth Summit. In that one paragraph, that ties the American Planning Association to Al Gore and Earth in the Balance, Sustainable Development, the President's Council on Sustainable Development, and Agenda 21. But you go on their website, they've got a whole section on there that says, oh, that's all a big conspiracy theory. We won't do anything like that at all. Funny, in 1994 they did. Then, in 1997, put it there, the United States issued this report. This is a 70-page report in 1997, 5 years after Agenda 21 was introduced. This is addressed to the United Nations to give a report on the progress in implementing Agenda 21. I testified before a Maine legislative committee a couple years ago, and before that I was brought in to talk to a reporter, and I walked up to him and I said, here, hold this. And he said, why? I said, because they're going to tell you it doesn't exist. It's in your hands. You know? He looked at me a little funny. I keep these papers straight. There we go. In 1998, in the Congressional Record, on a report on the EPA's Challenge Grant Program, it says The Challenge Grant Program is also implementation of Agenda 21. And then finally, in 2011, the EPA puts out a report, The History of Sustainability, and page 5, Agenda 21, and the whole report on it, the President's Council on Sustainable Development and how that worked. What do they call it? A comprehensive blueprint. So, on and on it went. The blueprint, the plan, the consensus, the direction for changing how people will live. Here was the plan for the 21st century, how all human beings were going to live. And boy, they were proud of it. Everywhere you turned. Fact is, it wasn't until about the mid-2000s that such pride in this and openness about it changed to denial and charges of conspiracy theories. And why is that? What happened? Well, that's when I and the John Birch Society and several other folks started to reveal the truth. Actually, we've been revealing it for a long time before that, but people weren't listening. Finally, it was starting to take hold. I wrote an article at the beginning of the Tea Party, and they were talking about end the Fed and lower taxes and things like that. And I wrote an article and I said, you cannot restore the Republic without this information, and told about Agenda 21. And it went viral, as they say, through the Tea Party, and it became one of the top 2 issues as a result of that. And when that happened, then all of a sudden, all of this denial started. Suddenly, the sustainable development movement became hard-pressed to remember anything like that. Never heard of it, went the cry. One of my favorite things they say is, there are no blue-helmeted troops at City Hall. And the thing they say now is, oh, you mean that innocuous 20-year-old document that has no enforcement capability? It was just a suggestion. Well, fact is, Agenda 21 certainly does exist, and it's being enforced at every single level of our government. So why is it a threat? And how did it get into your community? Because it's here. I guarantee it. To understand the true threat of Agenda 21, you must first understand, number one, it is not an environmental policy. It is not designed to protect the earth. Global warming is the most valuable tool they have, because the threat of environmental Armageddon has got normally sane people throwing their liberties on the bonfire like a good old-fashioned book burning. We've got to save the planet. Agenda 21 is a threat to our nation, to your local community, to you, because it is a comprehensive blueprint specifically designed to change our way of life and our form of government. That's its true purpose. That's why they call it an agenda. The official policy of Agenda 21 is called sustainable development. You're going to hear that term used anywhere you go. It's in the news, it's in advertising. Companies are now, you can get this because this is grown sustainably. You hear it everywhere. Farming practices, energy use, local development. The 3 announced ruling principles of Agenda 21 are social equity, economic prosperity, ecological integrity. You notice the connecting circles. That's because they're interconnected in all their policies. These 3 things control every aspect of your life. Social equity is probably the biggest one, the biggest blanket over you. Social justice, social engineering. That's what it's about, redistribution of wealth. And everything we're hearing today about how we've got to get rid of our culture, get rid of our history, racist, all that kind of stuff we're hearing, those are all cries of social justice. There's no such thing as social justice. It's just a bunch of whiners that don't like the way things are. Get you to change your mind. Political correctness, which is nothing but a word for a noose around your neck. Economic prosperity, public-private partnerships. I'm sorry to say that there are libertarian organizations, some conservative organizations, that tout public-private partnerships as free enterprise. I'm sorry to say you can't have a partnership between business and government, equal partnership. Government's job is to protect the businesses from being able to, so they can do their enterprise. But partnership, equal, what you're ending up with are certain corporations that are willing to play ball, and they use the power of government to put their opposition out of business. They are using the power of government to get the best places to put their businesses, to get tax breaks, things like that. Government in that partnership gets to hide behind the independence of the businesses and get them, the businesses for them are selling to us through their products, through their advertising and so forth, what government is trying to get us all to do. That's the partnership. That is right out of the playbook of Mussolini's fascism. That's what it is. And ecological integrity, that's just the excuse for the whole thing. Now, in 2015, the United Nations held yet another international meeting with thousands more delegates, basically a repeat of 1992, and they introduced the 2030 agenda. Now, when I talk about Agenda 21, I have people rush up to me, no, Tom, it's now the Agenda 2030. They've replaced that. No, they haven't. It's exactly the same plan. They're just getting more bold in telling you more details. In 2000, they had the Millennium Summit, and they created the Millennium Project. One of the people I debated at Cambridge, a 200-year-old debating society, was Salehi Shetty, the head of the UN Millennium Project. And we were sitting at dinner before we went into debate. I had ignored him through most of the dinner, but finally I turned to him and I said, "You realize you don't have a prayer, don't you?" And he looked at me and he said, "About what?" And I said, "Eradicating poverty," which was their number one goal, using redistribution of wealth. And the goal was by 2015. He said, "Yeah, I know." Then we went into debate. Well, that's what this whole thing with Agenda 2030 is. The UN uses these things. Now they've taken those 8 goals of the Millennium Project to 17 goals for Agenda 2030. They're exactly the same goals. They just are getting more detailed. They split them. They're kind of splitting and moving in this direction like a big monster. So, and again, all it is, it covers redistribution of wealth, control of land and water, control of food production, lifelong learning and education. Lifelong learning, we used to think, remember under the Clinton administration, they were talking about getting computers in the classrooms for kids that were a little bit slower, didn't quite get it. I was one of those in math. And they, this would give them a specialized education program just to help them move up. This is how it was sold, lifelong learning. We've got opportunities for the rest of our lives. We're going to have the opportunity to learn. That's all a lie. Those computer programs test and test and test the kid on his attitudes, values, and beliefs, not academics, until he starts to give the right answers. And then it's a successful academic exercise. And the lifelong learning, that's the way we make sure that once we've produced a global village idiot out of the classroom, that they stay a global village idiot for perpetuity. That's what it's about. It's all still Agenda 21. It's still a drive for control of the entire earth and everything and everyone in it. And sustainable development is still the driving force to make it all reality. So, now, we live in a world of sound bites. We're supposed to be able to say things in quickie little sentences so we all get it, because everybody has the attention span of a gnat, understand? Well, to take an issue like Agenda 21 and try to put it in a sound bite is literally impossible. And people are just overwhelmed by this huge thing affecting every part of their life. I've done my best to put this down to help you understand how they're implementing this in as short as possible. There are 3 main points of attack through the enforcement of sustainable policy. 1, destroy private property ownership and control. That's number 1. You cannot implement sustainable development without destroying private property rights. Private property rights are in their way. 2, impose non-elected regional councils and regional governments, taking government further from the people. And 3, feed the whole plan with federal grant money. They come with very specific strings attached, and when the community takes the grant, suddenly they find out they may have wanted to just fix the sidewalks downtown, but now they've got to figure out how to rebuild the entire place. Now, let's start just kind of an overview looking at your local city council or your county commission meetings or the planning meetings. First, you're going to hear a completely new language that's being used. You're going to hear these words: wetlands, conservation easements, watersheds, viewsheds, rails to trails, biosphere reserves, greenways, carbon footprints, partnerships, preservation, stakeholders, land use, environmental protection, development, diversity, visioning, open space, heritage areas, and comprehensive planning. It's all part of the new language of government. And what you'll rarely hear are references to private property, free enterprise, or the considerations for individual choices. You will also notice, as you look around the room, in a city council meeting or what have you, there's a lot of faces there that, really aren't all that local. You don't recognize them. But they seem to be wielding an awful lot of influence during the meetings. In fact, you may notice your elected representatives giving them a lot of attention. Who are they? They are planners and representatives of private organizations, of non-governmental organizations. The Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, ICLEI. But there's also more. There are organizations that are pushing for independent or individual projects: bike lanes, conservation easements, land trusts, these kinds of things, heritage areas, all of those kind of things. There are organizations in place to push every one of those things. And the funny thing that you'll start to hear, and you'll even see written in a lot of the documents that they produce, they're talking about stakeholders. These private organizations call themselves the stakeholders. And you'll hear your elected officials mention, well, we met with the stakeholders. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that you're the stakeholders. You're the ones paying the taxes. You're the ones who have to live under these regulations that they're putting in place. These guys, they just come into town in time to put it all in place and then leave. All of these organizations, some of them may be national, some of them are international, all of them are working towards the goal of reorganizing human society. Many of them helped to write the federal grant programs. Let me explain how this happened. After President George H.W. Bush signed Agenda 21 in 1992 at the Earth Summit, saying, "Oh, sounds good to me. Whole country, hey, that's for America." It's funny, he didn't read the Constitution. I don't know. But once he did that, then Bill Clinton became president, and Bill Clinton immediately issued an executive order to create the President's Council on Sustainable Development. Now, these same organizations inside the UN that wrote Agenda 21 in the first place converged on the United States. They began to go into federal agencies, HUD, EPA, the Department of Transportation, others, and they began to work with them to write the grant programs. The grant programs were designed to have very specific strings attached, so if you complied with the grant, you were implementing Agenda 21. They also held seats on the President's Council for Sustainable Development, along with agency heads and business leaders, big corporations. I find it really ironic that Enron was one of the representatives on the President's Council. I mean, they knew how we were going to move forward. So, the American Planning Association, as I mentioned, is the largest and most respected planning group in the nation. They are operating in almost every single community. The American Planning Association is part of something called the Planners Network. The Planners Network is officially run by a group called the Organization of Progressive Planners. Is that a clue? It's an association of professionals, activists, academics, and students involved in physical, social, economic, and environmental planning. That's 4 ways of saying the 3 E's of Agenda 21 in urban and rural areas. They promote fundamental change in our political and economic system. Now, those things I just read to you, that just part right there, I got from their website. That's what they say they are. Along with the United Nations, the Planners Network openly advocates that free markets and private property are not sustainable. So, now you go to the website, plannersnetwork.com, and read their statement of principles. And here's what you'll see. Quote, We believe planning should be a tool for allocating resources and eliminating the great inequalities of wealth and power in society because the free market has proven incapable of doing this. That is social engineering. That is what every planner in every community believes, and that is what is incorporated in every planning program that they create. Social justice, redistribution of wealth. Eventually, the local government, after all these plans have been put together, this all goes on behind the scenes without anybody ever seeing it. We're putting all these little plans together. We applied for the grant. We got all this ready. Then they have a big deal where they announce it to the community. We have a vision for Spokane. We have a vision for us all. We're going to have a better world. Local governments announce this for our future development. And they begin to put this in place. You begin to see the establishment of water councils, energy councils, development councils, land councils, all designed to control each of these vital needs. You'll also find, in a lot of them, the requirement to, in building codes, to follow international plumbing codes, international electric codes, things like that. All part of the local program. One of the main effects of these visioning plans is that private property rights begin to disappear. As land use becomes tightly controlled, taxes go up to control energy use. Community development begins to mean the use of eminent domain to tear down neighborhoods and replace them with pack and stack high-rise housing. Most importantly, as the grants and the stakeholders begin to take hold of the community, watch how the function of legitimate elected government within the sustainable system becomes little more than a rubber stamp to create and enforce the dictates of these non-elected stakeholder councils. Ladies and gentlemen, this becomes the demise of representative government. Why go to the polls and elect somebody? You vote for somebody because you like what they have to say and what they think the future for the community is, that you like that. But we're getting to the point where they don't have the opportunity to exercise that because the grants and the NGOs are there. And a little later I'm going to show you exactly how all that works. Once the councils are established, it becomes much more difficult to discuss issues with your elected representatives. Because now, instead of being able to sit down and have a cup of coffee with them and say, Harold, I mean, what are you thinking here? Well, let me think about that. Instead, he'll say, well, you need to go talk to the proper council or the administration or the department. They'll take care of you over there. And so you go over there and you try to talk to Charlie behind the booth there, and he is nothing but an unresponsive appointed hack armed with his own political agenda. He does not care what your problem is. These councils begin to grow and expand in power. Eventually, regional councils are established, making up, they're made up of non-elected members, and they're appointed. They're supposed to represent whole areas, sometimes as many as 15, 16, 20 counties, all of them working to impose the same policies to every community under one umbrella. Now, I have people in these positions telling me, oh, Tom, there are elected people on those councils. We have some mayors, we have some city council, we have some county commissioners. You know what? Maybe true, but they weren't elected to be on that board, and now they're able to work behind the scenes, behind closed doors, without having to answer to the people. There they are. Regionalism is designed to undermine and replace locally elected representation. It takes government further from the people. And now today, we've got programs out of the federal government, particularly HUD, which will automatically put your community into a region. Sometimes the communities don't even know they've been put in the region. You've heard of affirmatively furthering fair housing? Have you heard this? This basically was pieces and parts came together through Obama executive orders. And interesting thing happened a few years back. Westchester County, New York, happens to be the home of George Soros and Bill and Hillary Clinton. They had taken a grant, and an NGO organization, which by the way consisted of two people, a husband and wife, decided to check on something. Here's this grant with these strings attached. Did Westchester County comply to that? Well, they thought they'd find out. And they found out, well, there were pieces and parts they didn't impose in it. So they filed suit. They won a $60 million lawsuit. That was more money than the county had gotten in grant money. And the funny thing was, this two-person NGO put a bunch of that in their pocket. What a great deal. Well, HUD suddenly stopped in their tracks, and they looked at this, and they said, wow, look at this. And they began to use that as their model. Next stop, Marin County, California, then a county in Iowa, and other counties around in other cities around the country. HUD agents converging on communities, filing lawsuits against communities for not complying. The end result of this is your elected officials become nothing but agents to follow the dictates of these federal representatives. They become your government. These regional councils are usually the ones that apply for the grants, infecting every community in that whole system. Their plans do not protect private property, and the regional councils impose a one-size-fits-all regulation without regard for local wants and needs, and fighting them becomes nearly futile. Who do you talk to? Where do you go? How do you stand up to them? Regional councils answer to no one. They are not elected, and that makes them the perfect vehicle to enforce sustainable policies, which, what's the point of that? What's the purpose? Is designed to change human civilization. The grants with the strings attached make sure of it. The grants dictate rules, regulations, and money to urban and rural communities across the country, enforcing code revision, transit-oriented developments, so-called affordable housing, corridor planning, green building codes, and climate change policy. And they use the force of eminent domain to recreate your entire community within the image envisioned in these codes and these development plans. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what local officials are telling you is a local plan. That is what the blueprint is in action. That is what regional planning really is. And groups like the American Planning Association push the process, and they say, they'll bring these out. We have a voluntary plan to cut our carbon footprint. We're going to try our best to reach this goal, to cut our energy use, to cut down on our water use. They have all kinds of little plans there. You know what happens to those voluntary ideas? They become mandatory rules and regulations dictated through the grant programs. And today, across the nation and throughout the world, there are regional visioning programs being put in place. The interesting thing, you can Google Dubai 2050 or Jamaica 2050 or Heartland 2050, which is Nebraska. They all read exactly alike. The one thing that all of these plans have in common, none of them are local. It's all the same. These are the exact same plans, no matter where they are in the world. And that's by design, because they are being implemented by the same planners across the country, fueled by the same grant programs, and aided by the same NGO groups. Usually the term is smart growth in most of the cities. Smart growth planners promote their schemes by insisting that Americans live the wrong way. And they insist land use regulations to impose all this will help us live the right way. So here's how it works. They put a line around the city, and they say no growth will take place outside of this. That's urban sprawl. We're going to have everything inside a perfect human habitat. And they begin to put all the pieces and parts in place. They begin to put regulations on building, as we talked about, and targeting cars, things like that. And this becomes the focus for future housing. It means that the use of private cars are discouraged in favor of public transportation, bikes, and walking. And here's how they do that. How do they get you out of your cars? Higher taxes on cars, of course, and on gasoline. I love it. fracking miraculously, through all these rules and regulations, the free market worked and brought down the price of gasoline, almost cut it in half. An amazing event that most people have missed. Well, what was government's response to that? Well, look, the gas prices have come down now. We had it at $4, now it's closer to $2. Well, let's tax it. We'll tax a little higher. People won't notice. We'll just put the tax on there. So the benefit of all this wonderful thing is government, which didn't do anything to have it happen in the first place. The other thing, they are now beginning to work on plans to tax every mile you drive. Every car you've got now, unless it's a much older one, has that little black box in it that will tell them everything about your driving habits, including how many miles. For a long time, it was an argument in the Obama administration. Would it be the federal government or the states that would charge these mileage taxes? Obviously, they figured it's the states because Oregon became the first state to begin to implement it. Most plans include a program they call the Complete Street. I love this, the Complete Street. That's an edict that cars have to share the road with bicycles. Every one of these things is designed to make it more difficult to drive your car. And so that you begin to say, I need to go to the grocery, but oh man, I don't want to get in a car and go. And that's a victory for them when they've done that. Now they're putting, and they have a thing called traffic calming, where they put the speed bumps down the street. And you go, kaboom, kaboom. So now, with the speed bumps there, now they want you to buy one of these little clown cars that they say are environmentally correct, where 1.5 people can sit in them. And now you're driving down the street with the speed bumps, and you're going way up over this side, on that side, and then down on this side. Well, eventually you're going to say, I'm going to stay home. In many streets, in cities, San Francisco, they're now building residential apartment buildings without parking lots. New York City implemented what it's called a progressive street project. They built more than 400 miles of new bike lanes, and they created a massive pedestrian plaza in Times Square by closing 5 blocks of Broadway to cars. It's hard enough to drive anywhere around Broadway, but now they've closed off 5 blocks. The announced purpose was to, quote, change the culture. The pedestrian plazas are placed in the center of what were once busy streets, blocking off the traffic, making it difficult to drive in the city. But here the language that they use to promote these things, that people can now congregate and sit at tables and outdoor atmosphere and enjoy each other rather than rushing around by themselves in cars. One of the leaders of this project said, quote, what we're trying to do is see equity in public places, social equity. Here's my favorite quote from her. She goes on to say, when you build your streets for cars, you're actually building in the expectation that people are going to have cars. So you stop having streets, people obviously would stop wanting cars. Then she went on to explain, it costs $10,000 per year for a household to own and maintain a car. We're talking about building an affordable option for people to get around. Social engineering, social justice. I was speaking in Atlanta a few years ago, and one of the other gentlemen who was on the podium, Atlanta was really working to push their light rail train system there for this very purpose. And they had told, in the promotion of it, here's what it'll cost, and here is how many riders we expect. Well, this guy decided to do a little experiment, and he did an overlay. And here's what he found out. For the amount of money that they said it would cost to build, for the number of riders that they said that would be on it, he figured out that he could buy a limousine for each one of those riders and throw in a chauffeur. Now, tell me if you have heard your local officials say something like this in defending their plans. They talk about the chaotic growth. We can't allow that. We've got to have a good plan to have the community move forward, right? You hear these things, right? Chaotic growth. Listen to this quote. The chaotic growth of cities will be replaced by a dynamic system of urban settlement. The region is formed by the economic interdependence of its development from the industrial complex to the industrial region. The region has a single system of transportation, a centralized administration, and a united system of education and research. Sound familiar? That quote was made by a gentleman, an architect, named Alexei Gutanov in 1968. He was a Soviet-Russian architect writing in a document called The Ideal Communist City. Could it be that sustainable development really is the extension of the master plan for the ideal communist city? Of course not. Your local elected representatives, planning groups, the planning departments, they all deny any international connection to their planning programs. It's all local, local, local. So now we have, coming out of everywhere, local, 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 Russia, 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 local, local, local. I mean, it's all the same. And where will all this lead? Well, let me give you a little idea. I know you've all felt some of this anyway, but a few decades ago, Portland, Oregon was announced as the poster child for smart growth policy, and there it was pretty much fully implemented. Once the ban on suburban development, that urban sprawl that they call so disdainfully, is in place, there is now a controlled living area that does not grow. What happens when the population of the community does grow? It gets crowded, more densely populated. There's only one way to go. Up. In Portland, the planners kept upping the density requirements for housing. To increase urban densities, the planners turned dozens of neighborhoods of single-family homes into apartments and condos. Eventually, Portland planners decided that row houses and low-rise apartments were not enough. They changed the rules to enforce the building of high-rise apartments. That's pack and stack that we call them. And again, the promotion. Livable, walkable communities. They paint a lovely picture, almost like a 18th century atmosphere, but with modern technology, where everybody can play in the parks and walk to the store and hang out with your neighbors and your family, play with the kids, ride your bikes. A happy, healthy neighborhood, they call it. Every one of these plans always talk about healthy. You know what they mean by that? Because you have to chug along on your bicycle or walk. San Francisco built a few years ago a government building that they said was the most sustainable building in the country. What was so wonderful about it? It was so healthy because the elevator only went to every other floor, so you had to walk up the steps to get to the next floor. How healthy. I don't think it complies to the Americans for Disabilities Act. But eventually, Portland planners decided that row houses, low rents were not enough, so they move it up. They call the center of the plan in Portland was the light rail train system. The desirable homes, according to the planners, were those that were along the train system. That way, we were going to get cars off the streets. You just get on the train and go. So we'd get rid of the cars. The streets wouldn't be crowded with them. Bottom line to all this is, it's all a lie. The result of Portland's grand plan is that increased density destroyed the local neighborhood atmosphere. Congestion is worse. Crime is on the rise. Housing and consumer costs are higher. And urban services such as fire and police and schools actually declined a bit as the city took money from those programs to subsidize the high-density developers. And those growth boundaries, that line around there, limit space. Few can afford a single-family home even if you can buy one. These smart growth economic realities. And now, what do we hear from the promoters of this about we want diversity and we want to help the poor and we want to rise people up equally and so forth? Smart growth economic realities are now forcing low-income and young people out of their ethnic and low-income neighborhoods and into public housing programs as expensive high-rise condos replace their homes and destroy any local businesses. As they bring those bulldozers into the center of the community and they begin to wipe it all out, there are people there who have homes. And I want to tell you, first of all, I haven't mentioned this, but the only real way to eradicate poverty is through private property ownership. This is the only way that the average person has a chance to make a large amount of money. And the reason that we have such teeming poverty around the world is because private property is not allowed. And so you have folks there that have private property. They also have private small businesses, mom and pop shops and so forth. The bulldozers come in and take it all down. Then they build these expensive condo high-rises, and corporations come in, and now they're the businesses that serve it all. What happened to those people there? They're put on government programs. They're now trapped. They are now told by the government, here's how much money you're allowed to have and how to live, and here's where you're going to live. And these people have no opportunity for hopes and dreams and building a life of their own. This is creating a section of our country where a certain segment of people are forced to live in a different way than any of the rest of us. And you can boldly say, well, they can get off of welfare and they can go out and do it on their own. Who is going to give up a surefire money coming in, no matter how little it is, if they've got no real prospect that they can replace it? They're not going to do that. The program stinks. The program is wrong. The program should be changed. But smart growth is making it worse by the minute for these people. In the San Francisco Bay Area, thousands of low-income families are being uprooted from their homes and relocated. They're putting in what they call preferred development areas. These guys are so clever with their terms. And in Portland, of course, over 10,000 minority families were put out of their urban homes. In Seattle, the city government now, which has been doing all this stuff for decades, has now run out of federal grant money, but they have found that they have to spend more money for more of the subsidized housing, and so now they're going to start charging construction taxes to pay for more of this housing, raising the prices of homes even more. As smart growth policies are fully implemented, the only property owners in the future, this is something to really consider. Look at these cities as they are, as far as the eye can see, these condos. There's no property rights there, except the corporations that own that. There'll be no property owners. There's going to be corporations now in partnership with government. And they will make all the decisions on living conditions in direct partnership with the government. That isn't freedom. And what's going to happen when they've gone up as high as they can and the population continues to grow? They're going to start they're already doing this, making the condos smaller. Eventually they get smaller and smaller and smaller to where you've got a cot and you've got a sink. No, I'm sorry, that's a prison cell. That's and what's it like living in the utopia of sustainable development where everything is well controlled and well ordered? As populations continue to grow, they get smaller. Power companies in partnership with government are now installing smart meters on private homes. These meters give the power company the ability to control your temperature in your home. They will control the thermostat as a means to cut your carbon footprint. By the way, if you have no carbon footprint, you are dead, which I think is probably the goal. And anybody trying to stop them from installing these on their own private property are met with arrest and no power. In Montgomery County, Ohio, a lady by the name of Jenny Granado and her family are the victims of the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission as that commission forced a bike highway across their property. This is not a bike path that we go out on the weekends and just have a good time with the friends. This is meant to be downtown Saigon with bicycles and everywhere. Jenny knew that she has a 150-year-old farmhouse, and they had a yard out in front. There's a highway that runs in front, but they had a big, thick hedge right there, and to block out the traffic and stuff. And her mother had a beautiful magnolia tree. She had a swing sitting right there. Loved to sit there under the swing, look at it. They knew something was coming, but they didn't know what, and they didn't know when. One day, Jenny's mother heard a racket outside, and she went outside just in time to see the bulldozers take down the hedge and her magnolia tree. Her mother grabbed her chest and keeled over and died from the shock of it. One of the members of the planning commission said, well, stuff happens. I cleaned that up. Jenny went to the county commission and complained. And they said, we didn't do anything. That was the planning commission. We didn't do anything, the regional commission. So she went to them. And they said, well, we didn't do anything. We just applied for the grant. No one was responsible. And that is the true reality of regionalism. These non-elected regional councils should never have the opportunity, the power to commit local communities, local elected governments to policies and regulations. They must only be done by people that you elect. You want them there. Little town of Rindge, New Hampshire. Didn't know anything about any of this stuff. Tiny little place. I was honored to speak there a couple years ago. They realized something weird was coming out of the county commission, weird policies. They began to look into it and everything. Long story short, in 1 year's time, they replaced the entire county commission, and they passed an ordinance that said that this local government cannot apply for a HUD grant without a vote of the people. That's the kind of thing that we need to do with this. And let me just say, the problem, I'm not talking here about traditional zoning and planning. There's a lot of debate about that. Should we have zoning? Should we not? What I'm talking about here is the emergence of raw government power that is unchecked and out of control as it ignores individual liberty and private property rights, and you have no ability to talk to them. Further, we see more and more governments armed with the federal grants imposing these arbitrary rules and putting everybody in a one-size-fits-all straitjacket. More government power leads to more government corruption. And I don't care, even if you believe there needs to be changes in our society to protect the environment, surely any honest American would admit that such actions by government are out of line. Here's the interesting thing. A few years ago, the American Planning Association did a study to see if all of their efforts to enforce smart growth worked. Their own study showed smart growth does not work. Here is the final concluding paragraph of the APA's study. The current planning policy strategies for land use and transportation have virtually no impact on the major long-term increases in resource and energy consumption. They generally tend to increase costs and reduce economic competitiveness. In many cases, the socioeconomic consequences of less housing choices, crowding, and congestion may outweigh the very modest CO2 reduction benefits, end quote. But has the APA stopped pushing this mess? No, because they're getting very wealthy and powerful off the grants. Sustainable development is an international scheme disguised as national and local policy created to rein in those radical ideas of individualism and personal privacy or private property rights, and to harmonize all nations into a central global control. You know, control the world. And if we allow them to change and control our system of government, then we will go into a dark ages unknown in human history. And isn't it significant to see that as private property comes under attack through sustainable development, that our country is also becoming less wealthy and less free? So how do we fight back? One fact is clear. They will not be able to enforce sustainable development without damaging or destroying property rights. It's time that we demand a government that treats property owners like owners, not chattel to be pushed around.
Right. Absolutely.
Stand up for property rights, and we can stop sustainable development, and we can put a cork back in government. But we got to have leaders who understand that and who are willing to do that. And understand this, as I said in the beginning, the fight starts on the local level, not in Washington, D.C. We spend all of our time focusing on Washington. Right here, this is where we can turn it around. Those pushing for forces pushing for the sustainable agenda are deeply entrenched in every city. They are highly organized and massively funded, and they have that very specific goal, and they will stop at nothing to fulfill it. We have one choice: to fight. Fight for your homes, fight for your community. It will take, literally, it will take a trench warfare in every city council meeting and in every county commission meeting. Here's one of the problems with our movement. We want it now. Now, now, now. And we go to a meeting, we sign a petition, we make a phone call, and nothing happens. And we go, well, that didn't work. There's nothing I can do. We've lost the republic. Oh, golly, shucks, golly. The other side knows you're going to do that. They know you're going to go home. They're sitting there like this saying, okay, they're gone. Now, here we go. Let's go on with it. We can't do that. Number 2, get a clear definition of property rights so you have a platform to stand on. Let me give you one. Comes right from your state. Supreme Court Justice Richard B. Sanders, in 1995, they were dealing with more and more of these sustainable development cases where they suddenly realized that they didn't have a good definition of property rights. So Justice Sanders wrote this, quote, "Property in a thing consists not merely in its ownership and possession, but in the unrestricted right of use, enjoyment, and disposal. Anything which destroys any of the elements of property to that extent destroys the property itself. The substantial value of property lies in its use. If the right of use be denied, the value of the property is annihilated and ownership is rendered a barren right." That is exactly what you're dealing with. You pay your mortgage, you pay your taxes, and every other decision on your property is made by somebody else. You can't use it unless somebody else says you can. That's a barren right, and your property rights have been annihilated. He's absolutely, perfectly correct in that. Achieving private property ownership and its unrestricted use is the foundation for a nationwide revolution of freedom. Demand it. Demand it. Agenda 21 is the Common Core, and it has already invaded every corner of our lives. And sometimes I know it feels hopeless. I know. I've been all over the country. I've seen wonderful, courageous people trying to fight. And you understand, this is a political movement. It's led by those who want to control our lives. They use the philosophical base of Karl Marx, the tactics of Adolf Hitler, and the rhetoric of the Sierra Club. Basically, everything connected with sustainable development translates to higher costs, shortages, and sacrifice. Now, what do we do about it? Will you, I know we've gone a little while, would you engage with me in an experiment? I want to show you something. Will you do that? Okay. Come on up, Jim. Jim's my assistant in this. I need 5 volunteers. What I'm going to do with this, come on up, five people. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to show you your government. You know, you hear it hiding behind the closed doors. I'm going to show it to you. 1, 2, 3, 4. I need one more. One more. Okay. What we're going to do, I'm going to have an election. You are a county commissioner. You are a county commissioner. You are a county commissioner.
Appointed.
No, I'm electing you. You are a county commissioner, and you are a county commissioner. Now, these guys have run for office, and you've been involved in your community, right? You go to meetings. You're concerned about what's happening. You've spoken out. All of you have done that, right? You say it right in your hat. You know, it's okay. Good people. They're not evil people. They're good people. They want to be involved. And now, you are here tonight and you're hearing me talk about Agenda 21 and sustainable development. Now, maybe you're going to get all energized tonight. That's what I'm hoping you'll do. And you will come, begin to get organized, and you're going to go trooping in to city council or county commission. And you're going to go up to them and say, and they're going to ask for time to speak. And they're going to graciously give you 3 minutes to say what you have to say. And usually now their chairs are way up here high, up on high. They can look down at you. And you get up there and you get those 3 minutes to say, you're imposing Agenda 21, United Nations Agenda 21. And what do you get when that happens? You get the eye roll and the sigh. Can you all do that? The eye roll. This is what we get. And they just kind of dismiss you. Now, why is that? What is it that has happened to take place here? Well, you see, I need 4 more volunteers. 4 more. Well, come on.
Come on.
This is our movie. Are we going to save America or not? You can't do it in the chair. Well, I only need 4, but but I'll get to you. I need you in a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. You are the Sierra Club. You are the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives.
I think I can do that.
You are the American Planning Association, and we got one more there. Yep. You can take that hook off there. Some of it, yeah. This is a local environmental group. Now, every community has one. In fact, you probably got about 50 of them. You're representing a big mob here. In my community, in Warrenton, Virginia, this is called the Piedmont Environmental Council. They control 9 counties, and they're also interconnected with others for other counties. They control every single thing that happens there. They literally are the people on these stakeholder councils. They are the ones who are employees at City Hall, things like that. ICLEI, what they do is they bring in, first of all, these guys decide to pay them dues of your tax money, and they bring in computer programs, training programs, newsletters, experts to come in. They set we were talking about setting the energy use and cutting the carbon footprint. They're the ones that set this. They helped write Agenda 21 in the first place and made it their goal to come into every community in the world and to implement these plans. Now, a couple years ago, they were up to 650 American cities paying them dues. I'm quite proud to say that once we put a real target on them, we were able to get 150 cities to rescind that. And the head of ICLEI USA, told a friend of mine, not knowing who he was, my friend said, "What do you think of all these groups attacking you?" He said, "Oh my goodness, we can't stop. We're terrified of those people. We can't get any more cities to join us." Yes. ICLEI, American Planning Association, we've talked about. Now, you guys step forward here as county commissioners, and you guys stand behind them, okay? Now, you go in there and you go, "You're imposing Agenda 21," and talk about all these things. These guys are standing behind them going, "Shh, don't pay attention to that guy's a nut. He's a nut, don't pay attention. By the way, I got that special money for that project for you." That's what they're saying back there. But that's not everything. I need 9 more volunteers.
Come on down.
All right. Huh?
If I volunteer, do I get to be Antifa?
If you don't volunteer, I'll turn you into Antifa.
He wanted his children to learn structure. And that's how this is set up. There's a class at 8 o'clock. Your kid needs to be there. It is Common Core free. There isn't a single piece of anything in our information that has anything to do with Common Core in it. We encourage you to check it out. Talk to friends and people you know who are interested in homeschooling. February 10th, a Saturday, 2:30 here at Center Place. Please come hear what he has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Again, this is classical education. I know my granddaughter goes to the Oaks. We spend a lot of money doing that. I'd love to be able to homeschool her using this program. Now, who has the...
We have a county commissioner here who would like to address everybody.
We're going to do the drawing first. And where are the... Okay, Rich? Yeah, we need to find somebody who was willing to pick a couple of winning tickets out. You? Oh, you had... No.
You want to pick a winning ticket? Here it is.
Oh, wait. All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. And the winner of the watch from Pounder's Jewelry, worth $50, is 362-8944, of the last 4 digits, 8944, right here. Bring your ticket up. Okay. And 8944, I'll take that, and you can have that.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations.
All right, we need one more ticket drawn. Would you like to draw one? And the winner of the first aid kit supplied by, I think it's Army Surplus up in Sandpoint, right? Yeah. 9028 are the last 4 digits. 9028? Aha, there he is. There you go. Okay, 9028, and that is it right there. Oh, we have one more. And courtesy of Steve Dunham, the back table there, and we have, Pat, would you draw one more, please? You can have that. And the winner of the book, Shadows of Power, is 8950. 8950. Going once. Going twice. That's what happens when you leave early. Okay, Pat, draw another one out, please. Thank you. And the winner is 9006. 90. Aha, there we are. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll trade you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I would urge each and every one of you, if you're not already a member of the John Birch Society, consider becoming a member, because it's much more than just paying dues. It is adding your voice to the society, it's adding your number to the society, and you're supporting an organization that presents this type of information, that sponsors that kind of program, that gets guys like Tom DeWeese into Spokane, into River City here, to speak to us, to give us that personal, up-close witness of what we can really do to make a difference in this community. Because you will realize, even those uninitiated out there that not involved in politics know that something's seriously wrong with America. They know that something is not right. They just don't have a clue as to what it is. The people in this room do have a clue, and I think it's incumbent upon each one of us that do to take the appropriate action to ensure that our children and my grandchild don't experience what these globalists have in mind for them. I think it is an opportunity that we're giving you right now. Sign up with the John Birch Society, become a member, read the New American Magazine, share it with other people, drop it in dentist offices like I do. I love doing that. They disappear quickly. People take them home. Anyways, who was it that wanted to say something? And who are you, sir? From where?
Kootenai County Commissioner.
Kootenai County. We're not. Come on up. Now, John Birch Society is not a political organization. I want to remind you that. And we control the podium. But what is it? What is it that you wanted to say?
Mr. DeWeese is exactly correct.
Yay. All right.
You need to have people in front of you. You need to. Mr. DeWeese is spot on the money. Had you have been in the room 1 week after the current board took office, you would not be fighting a transit system. Because what stands behind you is exactly spot on. There are all sorts of pressures, and everybody's really nice. They're not sticking fingers in your eyes. They're pleading with you. They're schmoozing you. And that influences commissioners. And you have to be able to ignore that stuff, and it's pretty hard, because when you walk into office, I represent you, not the employees of Kootenai County or any other county. I represent you. And when you walk into that door, you're surrounded by a whole different peer group. And guess what happens? You become part of that peer group. And it's a constant battle. And if you're standing out there in the front to keep people in line, they're going to stay on track. That's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. You know, one other person here I would like to ask to just say a couple of words is here, and she represents the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, CAPR. And obviously, sustainable development has zeroed in on property rights because they know that if they separate you from your property, and everyone has seen that blue and red map, right, of the United States, all the counties and all the counties that voted liberal and all the counties that voted conservative. Well, the difference in those is property ownership. You'll notice that those who don't own property, who only rent a place to park, who only rent a place to sleep, are voting liberal. They're voting to make certain that the services support them, that government supports them. The people outside of the big city, I'm sure you've all been over on Harvard Road and seen live, work, play in the same place. Nobody even has to move anymore. They can play downstairs, live upstairs, work across the street. Who needs to drive anywhere? This is insidious. And Cindy Zapataki is here representing the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights. And if you want to ask her about CAPR, they've got some events coming up. Ask her about that. Is there any other business? Nobody can hear you up there.
Oh, you can hear me. So I just went to a meeting last night, transportation, and I've met Tom DeWeese back in Oklahoma in 2009, and I have followed this Agenda 21 stuff. They're implementing roundabouts at Barker and Trent. So get that picture, you know, Trent runs 50 miles an hour, and then it splits right there at Barker, goes overpass, but you're still doing 50 miles an hour on Trent. They want to put in, they have 5 plans last night at the transportation meeting. Every plan was a roundabout, just in a little different location. So I asked, you know, I went around, talked to the different engineers, and I said, where are you coming up with this? You know, why not just a light? You're putting an overpass, blah, blah, blah. They're going, well, that is, WSDOT's default is roundabouts. I went, WSDOT's defaults are roundabouts. So this is just another action plan. I just stopped and talked to 2 city councilmen on the way in and informed them. They weren't even aware of it. They just knew that there was going to be an overpass over the railroad track. And they weren't aware that it's just the only plans that they had out there were the roundabouts. So get on their website, look at the pictures, and make some noise, because again, this comes out of the United Nations. It has to do with the Planning Commission. It has to do with something called centralized sensitivity, something that all of the engineers are now being instructed on. And it's basically calming stuff. So
Traffic calming, yes. They want to calm you to a standstill. They want to calm you so much that you're going to be willing to step out of your car and take the bus and cuss. I thank you for coming tonight. Is there any other business? One other. John, yes.
All I want to say is, Tom has his down the hall. The John Birch Society has books here. We'll ask these people to give up their chairs. We'll make space. Hang out as long as you want.
He said, we have books, and we're going to make room back there. Take a look at the materials that we have. They are very helpful and useful. Yes?
This presentation
Okay, it has been, John, go ahead. Tell them about it. This is John Charleston with Grassroots Group, and he's going to tell you about how you can get this to other people.
So this will take less time than that. So if you're interested in the video, you want to go to youtube.com/NW NW Grassroots, and just hit the little subscribe button right there, and you'll get a notice in the email when it's done. It'll probably be up within the next couple weeks. NW Grassroots.
Thank you for coming and attending. I encourage you to join with us with the John Birch Society. Safe trip on the way home.
So come on up. Okay, come up here, Jim. Wait a minute, stand here. Okay. Now, here's what happens. One of the reasons why this is happening is that when these guys get elected, the first thing we do as a community is we ship them off to national organizations. And who do they hear there speaking but these guys at the podium, and they have sample legislation. And then they talk to other communities who have been through these things before, and then they come home and they meet them and say, you got the sample legislation? Hey, we got that money for you. They, after a while, begin to believe this is the proper role of government. So when a nut like me comes in and starts to talk to them, then they've never heard that. So who are these people? You are the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And let me just say here, the U.S. Conference of Mayors is a 501c3 private organization. In 1996, they made the Kyoto Global Warming Treaty a centerpiece of their agenda, and they are implementing the UN's Earth Charter as a guideline for policy decisions. Way to go.
Thank you.
Stand back there in the back. You are the National League of Cities, a 501c3 private organization. Cities got to pay dues to them. They support gun control, smoking bans, and other nanny state regulations. And they oppose private property rights movements. Good job. Are you in? Okay. You are the National Association of Cities, a 501c3 organization. What?
Counties.
I'm sorry. What did I say? Cities? Counties. I'm sorry. Counties. They're a 501c3 organization. They work with the Conference of Mayors, putting all these things in place. They even attack private property organizations. Yeah. You are the International City County Management Association, a private organization, 501c3, and you promote the concept of worldwide sustainable development as your policy of choice. Isn't that nice that you get a choice? You are the National Conference of State Legislatures, a 501c3 private organization, work to ensure that federal programs operate hand in hand with state programs. In other words, makes federal programs and implements state policy in a seamless and harmonized manner. Just very efficient. Yes, yeah. You are the Council of State Governments. Oh, a 501c3 private organization. You work to promote uniform state codes and regulatory systems, worldwide sustainable zoning. Yeah. And you are the National Governors Association. Yeah. 501c3 private organization. Interesting. You work to block workforce requirements for welfare benefits. Good going. Yeah. Okay, we got two. Hold that one. These two. You are the Environmental Protection Agency. You have been the sledgehammer for years to impose all that. I need one more here. Huh? You are the Housing and Urban Development Agency. And I told you about AFFH. By the way, Baltimore, the NAACP filed a lawsuit against the city for non-compliance. What they were saying was that putting all the Section 8 housing in one place causes ghettos, and that's not fair. And so they win a $30 million lawsuit to force Baltimore to build Section 8 housing into upscale neighborhoods because that'll make us all fair and equal. Way to go. I need one more. One more. Oh, I need this one. You are taking the walk of shame because you are the National Association of Realtors, the #1 organization in this country that ought to be the biggest defender and champion of private property rights, are one of the major proponents of sustainable development, smart growth policies. I am urging anyone who is a realtor, you have got to rise up against these clowns. You have got to stop this or you will have no product left to sell. These idiots are putting themselves out of business for political correctness and political power and grants. Shame. Take a good look, ladies and gentlemen. This is your government. This is your government. Now, what do we do about it? Let us look at it this way. Now, this is why when you rush into going, you're putting up Agenda 21, oh my goodness. And they're going, I roll, so, and get out of here. Sometimes people are bodily removed. Let's try it this way. I have here a document called A Resolution to Protect Citizens' Property Rights. What this document says is, number one, three things it says. Number one is, if they are going to discuss something that's going to affect my property, they'll bring me into the discussion. There's a radical idea. Second thing it says is, if you are going to go ahead with the plans and my property is damaged in a monetary way, some way that you're going to reimburse me for that one way or another. The third thing it says is that they can't bring their agents, their little lackeys, their little guys with cameras and measuring sticks and all this on my property to determine what they're going to do to my property without my permission. Radical. And here's how you use this. You get that 3 minutes and they're up on high, looking down, and you just say, ladies, gentlemen, as you're bringing these plans and these planners into our community, I've just got one question for you. What guarantees do I have that you'll protect my property rights? I'll guarantee you to a person, they will say, oh, of course we will. I'm a property owner too. I, in fact, have this on video from Roanoke, Virginia, by the way. And you just smile and say, I'm really happy to hear you say that. But gentlemen, ladies, I'd like to have it in writing, please. Now watch him turn purple. I've had him say, well, we'll take that under advisement. And go back the next week. Well, what do you say? In Roanoke, Virginia, the chairman of the county commission said, I'm not going to sign that. And the lady that I sent in there to do this said, well, why not? I'm not going to debate it with you. Well, I'm not going to debate it. I said, well, why won't you sign it? I believe there's a higher agenda afoot here. I'm not going to sign that. Three things. South Carolina, down in Greenville, had another lady do it. The county attorney marked it all up as to why they can't possibly sign this. Now, when all this comes about, and they say they won't sign it, because they won't. Nobody has yet. And I'll tell you what we're going to use it for, but when that moment happens, then you have to ask the most radical question in the English language. Why? And listen to what they say. This is a tool. This is a setup. This is getting them to openly admit they will not protect your private property rights. Now you have an opportunity for a campaign. Now you have an opportunity to throw one or two of them out of office. Now you have a tool. This is what it's for. Number one, do not do this alone. They will marginalize you and throw you out the door and nothing will ever happen. What you need to do on that day when you promote it, when you go back in and you ask them why they won't sign it, and you ask why, now you need 15 people in that line, and they need to say why. Matter of fact, everybody stand up. Everybody.
And say why.
Everybody say why.
Why?
Louder.
Why?
Louder.
Why?
That's the way your county commission meetings need to sound. The problem is these guys never feel any pain. You can sit down. They never feel any pain. They never have any consequences for what they do. You need to make them feel pain. You need to have them fear you, not you fear them. This is the key to it. We've got to make these places our own place. The other side's already done that. You got to turn out. Make them feel that pain. I guarantee you this. You start a campaign, next time you show up, bring some more people and have some posters that have some of their pictures on there saying, why won't he protect my private property rights? They do not want that light shining on. By the way, the reason that I kept saying 501c3 private organizations, because people believe that the National Governors Association, the Conference of Mayors, all these are government organizations. They are not. They have no authority whatsoever except these people give it to them. That's the reason. You get people in office who won't give them that, throw them out and send them home. They got no business in your community. You have a right to run your community the way you want it, not them. That's what it's about. And I guarantee you this. You take one or two of these guys who refuses to listen to you and run a campaign to get rid of them, and you succeed, these guys are going to shake in their shoes. Let me tell you what victory is. The day that these guys back here start to say, hey, I got the next plan for you. Hey, we got this ready. Got it all right here in a box for you. Got the money for it. And these guys look at it and say, are you nuts? Do you know what my people will do to me if we do this? That's victory. And that's where it has to be. You got to be engaged. You got to fight. It can be done. Can it be done, Jim?
Yeah, it can.
Absolutely. This.
Get these people like to sing these commissioners' song like "You're Gone," shake, rattle, and roll. Elvis is up front, so you commissioners won't listen to us and do it. Go.
So, gentlemen, I thank you very much for your assistance, and you're now out of office.
Boy,
Thank you.
I had fun being a commissioner.
Pay's not too good.
Oops, yeah, good. Thank you very much for all that. And you get the picture, ladies and gentlemen? This is what we're up against. I have 20 people up here. Take that by 10 behind them. All the money, everything. We are in a crisis situation. We are fast losing control of our government, but we are not out. It is not over. We have the opportunity to do this. I want you to fight like your lives depended on it. I saw on Facebook the other day, I saw a t-shirt for sale, and it said, if you're going to fight, fight like you're the third monkey on the ramp to Noah's Ark, and brother, it started to rain. I think that sums it up pretty well. You know, how many of you have seen the movie Robin Hood with Russell Crowe? You've seen this movie? When I watched that movie, it hit me that how similar our situation is today as to what it was back then. Here was a king who owned everything. He owned all the property. He had controlled all the money. He controlled the commerce. He controlled the law enforcement, everything. And so here you had all these people living under that. What possible chance would they have to rise up and do anything about that? And they began to work on it. They began to try to fight back. A little step, a little step, a little step. A lot of it was education. A lot of it was behind the scenes, trying to get things to go. But they began to fight under a slogan that said, rise and rise again until lambs become lions. Keep that in your mind. We have got to go to these council meetings. I hear, Karen, you can tell me, council meetings, do they ever hear our people? You guys, they're not there. We're not there. That's why when one of us shows up with one of these things, they think we're nuts because they've never heard it. We've got to be there, and they've got to be sitting there going, oh my God, they're back there again. Oh no. I cannot stay home. If you begin to look down and look at your feet and shuffle and say, well, I tried, but it's not going to work, One of the real problems with our movement, as I said, is we want it now. We go down and we want a full victory right now. We waved the sign and we made the phone call and we didn't get it. It's not going to happen. You've got to start looking at victories in incremental policies, in incremental ways. You've got to start, even if all you did was show up and make a statement there, that's a victory because you were there and you spoke out. You might be able to get somebody else who never heard this before to listen and say, oh, and now they begin to build a movement that way. Be there, show up, participate. All I can tell you is, one step at a time, rise and rise again until lambs become lions. Thank you.